The year was 1963, and MLK was leading segregation to an end with his famous I Have a Dream speech. African Americans were getting so close to obtaining civil rights, after fighting their hearts out through peaceful protests, boycotts, and marches. But why were they fighting for basic human rights? To understand, we must go back to see the way these people used to be treated. Before 1865, millions of African Americans were forced to put in labor for others. They were slaves. Most black people were slaves for over 200 years and were whipped and hung if they didn't do their work. Over the years, these people wanted change, and that would happen in 1865 when slavery would come to an end. But they were still treated poorly after. Throughout the early 1900s, African Americans were segregated for skin color alone, forced to use different water fountains, bathrooms, and to take hatred from every racist out there. They were especially treated unfairly by the police, as they could basically arrest African Americans for no reason at all. They kept taking the hate and wanted to change the way they were treated. The day was December 1st, 1955. A woman named Rosa Parks sat down on the bus after a long day of work. A white man wanted to get on the bus, but there was no room in the white section of the bus. So the bus driver asked 3 black men and Rosa Parks to move and make more room for the white section. The 3 men agreed, but she refused and was arrested and placed in jail. This shows a little bit of what it looked like.
Good morning, Mr. Bus Driver.
Morning, Mr. Rosa.
Here you go.
Where are you heading today?
Montgomery, Alabama.
Morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
I think you're gonna have to move.
Nah, sir. Sorry, I ain't gonna move today.
Ma'am, please move.
I don't think so. Not today, sir.
Ma'am, I'm gonna ask you one more time. You please move. It's the law.
Sir, I already told you I ain't moving today.
Okay, if you just keep refusing, I guess I should get the authorities on you.
You go right ahead, sir. I ain't moving today or any other day for that matter.
Hey, sir, over here, please.
Sir, what's the commotion?
This young lady over here is causing a problem.
I'm sorry, man. We can't have you causing trouble out here.
Get your raggedy paws off me!
You just earned yourself a lot of time in jail, miss.
Why does he deserve that seat any more than I do?
As more people in the African American community heard of the news, they began a boycott, which lasted 381 days and received a lot of support in Montgomery. Later, in November of 1956, the law that segregated blacks and whites on buses in Montgomery was lifted. This was mainly because the buses lost 80% of their revenue. But also, this is where the man himself, Martin Luther King Jr., would come to the big scene, as he was a big influence in creating the bus boycott. Martin Luther King would then be the well-known leader of the civil rights movement. On January 15th, 1929, a very important person was born. This was Martin Luther King Jr. He was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, in a very religious family. He lived with his parents, younger brother, and older sister. He decided that he would eventually follow in his father's footsteps of being a priest, but at a young age, he was questioning religion. He continued like this until he took a Bible class to make his father happy. Through high school, he became more and more religious, and he would eventually become a pastor. He went through the rest of high school and enrolled at Boston University, in the city where he met his wife. In 1954, King got his first job as a pastor at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. About a year later, he heard about the incident with Rosa Parks and met with other leaders of the civil rights movement to talk about what they would do. They all decided on the bus boycott, and King was voted to lead because of all that he could do at a young age. People say Martin Luther King was so influential because of his ways of peaceful protest. Others would advocate for freedom by any means necessary, but he thought differently. He was given the gift of persuading through speech, as he used the power of words and certain acts of nonviolent resistance. Here are a few excerpts from Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the south with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom. The March on Washington was a massive protest march that occurred in August of 1963, when about 250,000 people gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The event was meant to draw attention to challenges and inequalities faced by African Americans a century after slavery ended. It was also where Martin Luther King Jr. would give his famous I Have a Dream speech. The march took place on August 28, 1963. More than 3,000 members of the press covered the event to hear the several speeches that were given. King agreed to speak last, as he ended up speaking for 16 minutes, in what would become one of the most famous speeches of the civil rights movement, and also of human history.
Here we are at the March on Washington. Let's go take a closer look.
We want rights. We want rights. We want rights.
Sir, what exactly is it that you're fighting for?
I'm fighting to end segregation. Our Constitution states that all men are created equal. Who's to be judged by the color of their skin?
Thank you, sir. You heard it here first, folks. Now back to you, Cynthia, in the studio.
On July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was enacted by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Under the act, segregation due to race, religion, or national origin was banned at all public places, including courthouses, parks, restaurants, theaters, sports arenas, and hotels. For no longer could blacks and other minorities be denied service, only because of the color of their skin. The act also prohibited race, religious, national origin, and gender discrimination by employers and labor unions, and created equal employment for everyone.
are at the March on Washington. Let's go take a closer look.
We want rights.
Sir, come here. What exactly are you? Here we are. Here we are, folks, at the. Excuse me, sir. What exactly are you fighting for?
I'm fighting to end segregation. Our Constitution states that all men are created equal. Who is to be judged by the color of their skin?
Well, you heard it here first, folks.
Here's do a dope trick shot. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Ma'am, I think you're gonna have to move.
No, do it! You can't
Okay, give me another try.
You can't laugh.
Okay.
We had it perfect, the flick and everything.